Okay, we're going to have an overview of version control. Now, when you're working on a project, certainly to do with design projects, if that's anything from designing a poster to designing a website, and even if you're actually putting together a leaflet or documentation, you keep on having lots of different revisions, and maybe you work in a team and you show those people what you're working on, or maybe you're showing it to a client, or you want to test things out and then they don't work and you want to go back to a previous version. So what would have happened traditionally, you would have saved your project, then maybe made a duplicate of it, amended that and called it version 1, version 2, version 3, and you would keep on doing that, and it would be the case then you'd say final version 1, final version 2, final. So version control gets around this problem and makes it a little bit more sophisticated and a little bit more powerful than this just duplicating lots of folders. Version control will allow you to work collaboratively. Also, it will make sure you get snapshots of your project at crucial stages, so you can go back to that stage if you need to, and also you can do what they call branches or forking your project in other areas, which doesn't actually mess up the initial master project. Okay, so version control traditionally is used by computer programmers who are doing programming languages, and certainly you need to keep up to date with version control. Now, it's become very popular now with web designers and web developers to keep everything together and again work collaboratively, and also to capture snapshots of their project as they're building it. Now, if you can imagine version control when you are using it, is literally it has branches on it, very much similar to an underground map. It has these little stations here, and these in version control are referred to as the head or your current location. That's where you'll be at. So what you can do is you go back and forward, going back in time from station to station. Also, you can branch and fork your project off and do experimental work, and also you can merge projects. So once you're happy with something, you can merge back in. So what will be happening is you can just have one and just save it all the way up one sort of train track, but also you can have intersecting train tracks on it. Now, the most popular one, version control, is Git. It's been around for probably about 10 years now. Again, started off with software developers and software engineers, but it's a very crucial part of web design and web development in with professional companies. Now, what you get started with is Git. You would download it. You would go to the Git website and download the version and install it. Now, Git is also related to GitHub, but Git just works on your computer. GitHub is basically the collaborative way that it's sort of like in a cloud storage or on a remote server, so people can work jointly on it. Git can just work on your computer and you don't have to have an internet connection, and it'll keep version control and track your files as you're working on it. So you can download it for lots of different platforms. Certainly here on my Apple Mac, so it's sniffed me out and it's got that. You would download it. Also, it's got Windows. It's also got a very excellent book, an ebook, which you can download, and again, it has all the information on there. So that's what you do to get started. I've got a tutorial later on of how to download it and install it. Now, hopefully you might have heard of GitHub. Now, you need to get to grips with how Git works before you move on to GitHub. Now, GitHub is sort of putting it up on a remote storage where people can download. Also, they can clone your projects, or you can have things to do with forking your projects again. Someone can get your project and develop it. You can have two different types of what they call repositories or repos. To have private ones, you would have to pay a monthly subscription. So it's important you get to grips with Git before you move on to maybe using GitHub. GitHub does have, you can download it, and it does have a graphic user interface, whereas when you download Git and use it on your computer, you use it on the command line, which is basically traditionally how you used to work in computers. You used to type in instructions and commands on, let's say, a black screen with green text, and press enter and tell it to do stuff. That's what basically the command line is. And on an Apple Mac, you use the terminal. If you download Git for Windows, it'll download these things are called a shell, which is the window that you type in, and that will be called Git Bash. But on an Apple Mac, it's the terminal, and you would find your terminal in the applications folder inside the utilities folder. Again, you need to be familiar with using the command line, and there are lots of tutorials out there that allow you to free access tutorials. Also, there's ones paid for, like on lynda.com, which we'll look. So certainly you need to have some sort of training with the command line before you start jumping in, although a lot of tutorials do help you both with the command line and using Git. There's other companies who also offer similar products. One's called Atlassian, and you can go to their website, and it has some the products it has. It has something called Bitbucket, and Bitbucket, what that does, it allows you to have free private repos, whereas GitHub, you would have to pay for those. So sometimes if you don't want your project private, sometimes it doesn't really matter if you're only playing around making a website. It may not matter, but if you're actually doing some paid work, maybe you for a project for somebody, maybe you just don't want all the files out there in the public domain. So again, you can also work collaboratively. The free one allows up to 5 users. If you want to have more users on top of that, you start to pay a monthly fee. Now, this company also has a number of other products, and this is SourceTree. Now, what SourceTree does, it is a graphic user interface for using Git, and you don't have to use the command line. You just use it here. It shows you all the forks, as you can see here, very similar to the map I showed you. It shows you what it calls a diff, which is the difference between what's been changed, and also it'll give you all your commits in a graphic user interface. Now, this would be good if, say, you're just a graphic designer and maybe you're just doing some, say, files. You wouldn't be doing it with image files. Ideally, there would be files that have text in them. This would be a good point. Or later on, when you do know Git, you might want to, download this and use it. It's important to note that certainly if you had just had experience using Git with this and you're going for a job as a web designer or developer, if you go to an interview and you say, yeah, I use Git and I use SourceTree, their heads might explode. You're supposed to use the command line. What are you doing? So use Git through the command line and learn that. And later on, by all means, look at these other products like SourceTree. I've used this and it's quite straightforward. It may not have the full control you can get from a command line, but it might be useful to you depending on what the project you're working on. So it's worth a look. But first, familiarize yourself with Git and the command line. Then look at GitHub for uploading your work and sharing it remotely. And then look at other products, certainly like Bitbucket, which again, that's really good. Same as GitHub, but you're just having private repos. And then also at the end of that, look at SourceTree. Once you've got the idea of using on the command line, using it in a graphic user interface like SourceTree, really simple and straightforward. But don't start off with SourceTree. Use the command line. Now, there's lots of places you can get help as well. This is called Rise GitHub tutorial. And again, I think he's got a book on Amazon, but it's got a website with the pages on. Again, the address is below. Really good. Goes through explaining what everything is. Also, then he takes you through how to go about doing version control. So he gives us some projects to work on. Also, you can download the files as well and work along this too. This is really excellent, and you get lots of information out of going through this and following it. Now, if you're a subscriber to alinda.com, there are a number of GitHub tutorials and Git tutorials up on there. There's this one which is up and running with Git and GitHub, which is a really short overview which will help you get up and running. It's pretty recent. It's only been uploaded in July, so that is really good. So up and running with Git and GitHub. Then another one which is useful, which goes into more detail, it's called Git Essential Training. A little bit longer, it's 6 hours, and it will take you through everything about GitHub and using GitHub, both on a Mac and Windows. Okay, and then another useful one is GitHub for web designers. Now, as I mentioned before, Git, GitHub are mainly sometimes for, people who are doing programming or coding or something a little bit more heavy duty. And you want it to be focused on web design and development. And this is a good one because it focuses on more or less front-end web design. So this is GitHub for web designers, which again, this is sort of excellent with a web design focus. Now, finally, another really interesting one is version control for everyone. Now, this one, again, it's only about 2.5 hours long. It just goes you through all the different ways you can have version control, lots of programs, but also it does look at using what we mentioned before, the SourceTree program, and how to use this, their graphic user interface. So that's really good. It takes you through that if you're interested in, using that once you get a good idea of how Git and GitHub work.